The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We'll call the Board of Adjustment, February 23rd, 2021 meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to have some visitors with us today. Look forward to hearing from you. We'll start out though with, if you'll take roll, because we do have one of our members virtually, I believe.
Board Member Fry,
Here.
Board Member Miller,
Here.
Board Member Anders,
Here.
Board Member Vogel,
Here.
Board Member Goodwine.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all for being here and for Mr. Miller for joining us virtually. We're excited to hear these cases today. We do have 3 cases. We'll start with approval of minutes from our last meeting where we convened October 27th, 2020. Are there any corrections?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment. I think that would help. If
Okay.
anybody in the future were to be looking at these minutes on page 4, it says that a certain item case would be continued to November 17th Board of Adjustment meeting. And my understanding is that meeting never occurred, so I thought there should be something put in parentheses after that to state that this meeting did not occur, or this meeting was something, just to explain what happened.
Thank you for that. I'll refer that to our city attorney on what's the correct way to handle that, because this was a depiction of what was stated and happened in that time. And do we need to?
I move approval of the minutes with something being
You could,
added.
if the board wanted to, I think you could add a parentheses that did not occur. That would be, it would meet the factual request that you're trying to clarify, but it also doesn't change the fact of what happened at the meeting.
Okay, great.
That would be my motion, to be approved with something put in parentheses to explain why that meeting wasn't held.
Thank you. We have a motion with an update to that. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Vogel. Any other comments or input around the minutes? No, seeing none. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Are we okay to vote that way today? Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, with our guest here today, we do have time at the beginning of all of our meetings for public comment. If there's anyone that wants to speak to anything that's not on the agenda today.
Just any public comments.
Any-
It's more than just not on the agenda.
Okay, any public comments? No? Anyone? All right, thank you. Staff, if we could swear in our staff and speakers,
Okay.
Madam Clerk.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
I apologize if I wasn't clear on that. Anybody else that might want to speak today on any of these cases, you do need to be sworn in. Is there anybody else that needs to be sworn in? Nope. Okay, thank you. We'll start with our first case, BOA 2021-01. Elise Batzel with North Park Isle. We'll start with staff presenting the case. Welcome, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. Good morning. Robin Baker, Planning and Zoning Senior Planner, and I have been sworn in. The first case on the agenda this morning is BOA 2021-01, which is a driveway spacing variance request for the North Park Isle Plan Development District. The site's located near the northwest corner of East Sam Allen Road and North Wilder Road. Currently has a zoning of the North Park Isle Plan Development District with a future land use of residential 6. As we continue to navigate these requests for smaller lots, the applicant is requesting the following variances. A variance from section 102-1422-1, which is for a minimum driveway separation from the property line of 5 feet, which is a variance of 3 feet. Section 102-1422-2, a minimum driveway spacing requirement, which is center to center on the driveways of 30 feet, which is a variance of 30 feet. And from section 102-1422-5, for a minimum driveway spacing from a right-of-way of 29 feet, which is a variance of 21 feet. This particular subdivision is approved for 2,250 single-family lots. And in 2014, section 102-1422-2 was added to the Plant City Code of Ordinance to require all residential subdivision driveways to be spaced 60 feet apart from center line to center line. This would ultimately require every single lot to have their driveway in the same exact place. This requirement does make it difficult for subdivisions to provide required infrastructure while offering a variety of housing types and layouts. The engineering department is currently reviewing this portion of the code and plans to reduce this requirement in the near future by, as long as we stay on the same course, by only requiring the 8-foot separation off of the property line. The engineering department was consulted on the variance to driveway spacing from the property line and driveway spacing to the right of way and had no objections to the request as proposed. This is an overall view of what the North Park Isle Plan Development site plan looks like. You can't see the individual lots. This particular project is going to be developed in several different phases, so it was a little difficult for me to provide one overall plan showing you the lots, but this is the overall plan development layout. This is a graphic that was submitted by the applicant showing the actual spacing from the edges of driveways and showing, this next graphic is a little bit clearer, showing the actual requests where it's the 30 feet center to center by alternating the driveways back and forth. They're giving you a couple of different options there and what those distances would be. If they're all pretty much in the same place, as you can see for the 40-foot wide lots, they'd be 40 feet center to center. With the alternating driveway distance to kind of maximize that open space in between is where you get that 30 feet center to center. And 29 feet on the end, that's putting the driveway as close to the property line as possible. That's how far it would be from the right of way. It is staff's opinion that the applicant did submit substantial evidence for the 6 review criteria in support of a variance from sections 102-1422-1, 2, and 5 regarding driveway spacing. And staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance request to these sections for a reduction in the minimum driveway spacing requirement from the property line, center line to center line, and from the right of way. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Baker at this time?
I have a question. Was this because the lots went from a typical, going to throw a figure up there and I'm not sure if I'm correct, 60 foot to 45 foot? Is this why we're having these problems? Because this is not the first project that we've had come across like this.
Correct. And yes, you are correct. This particular project recently was approved for as small as 40-foot wide lots. But even in our normal scenario with a 60-foot wide lot, you know, your normal driveway is about 20 feet wide. And at that, they would have to be in the same exact spot for every single lot for them to be able to meet that 60-foot driveway spacing. And most builders like to provide some alternatives to their residents where, sometimes the driveway is on the left side, sometimes it's on the right side. So to be able to do that, you have to have that flexibility with the driveway spacing. And so this particular requirement causes a hardship to those types of developments. Now, with some of these larger developments, we are also implementing requirements for monotony control. And that's part of that, to make sure that every single house doesn't look exactly the same, that there's some differences to each house along the road. And so that's why staff does see this as a bit of a hardship on the developer, because they can't really provide the requirements that we're placing on them without these types of variances. Now, in the future, they can ask them as part of the PD process. But for now, this is one that was approved prior to the new PD code. And so they are forced to have to do a variance.
And I was wondering that as well. And I appreciate you explaining that, because it seems like that's being handled now in the deliberation by the city commission.
Correct.
So I appreciate that, that we're not out of sync or what have you. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yep, I think you did a fantastic job of explaining.
Thank you.
I have
Thank
another
you.
question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
And then it seems that prior setbacks, and I know that city commission's already approved this, but just for my own personal education here, do you see the projects in the future, many of them requesting 5-foot side setbacks?
They have the opportunity to do so. It doesn't mean that it will be approved. Through our amendments to the PD code, they are allowed to ask for what we call specific approvals. And that can be a reduction in setbacks. It could be, anything like that. But then they have to prove what they're doing to mitigate for that request. And at that time, if staff and the city commission feels as though they have offered up enough to mitigate for reduced setbacks, then it could be approved as part of the PD. But it is a process they have to go through. They have the right to ask, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll just get it because they asked for it.
Also want to add that that decision would be made by the city commission. It would actually not go under the PD ordinance. It does not go to the Board of Adjustment.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just really in awe. It's so close for me. I just reach out the door and feel your neighbor. I'm just amazed. So I'm just, when I read all this, and I should be up on all this, but I'm just concerned. I have a concern, and I have nothing to do with changing that as a Board of Adjustment, but I believe this is like the second project that came before us at 5-foot side yard setbacks. So I just wanted that clarified for my own personal interest.
Well, and so you understand with this particular project, the reason why they were able to achieve the 5-foot setbacks is previously in the PD code, we did have the opportunity for projects that were over 350 acres that they could request the reduced setbacks, but in exchange, they had to offer basically 40% open space with 10% of it being usable open space. And this particular project was able to provide that as part of their request. There's also some landscaping requirements that have to be put in. There's all of these extra requirements that they had to do to be able to achieve those reduced setbacks. Now, and again, the reduced setback request is only for planned developments. Anything that develops as a standard zoning subdivision that goes through the plat and construction plan process, they have to meet the regulations of the code. Any variations to the setbacks would have to come before this board.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for taking your time, and the board's thank you for listening to me, because I needed to just understand that. Okay, thank you.
It just means that we all learned something.
Yeah,
That's what I'm here for.
thank you. Any other questions for staff
I
at
have
this
one
time?
question.
Okay.
Towards the end of the report, it says the engineering department has no objections to the request and is currently reviewing this portion of the code and plans to propose a reduction to the driveway spacing requirement in the near future. Is there a timeline on, we're going to probably hear a whole bunch of these until this gets amended in the code? Has this been started, or is there a timeline on?
The process for the new technical manual or the revised technical manual has been started, but unfortunately the city has been without a solid city engineer. Mr. Frank Pokenauer has been acting as the interim city engineer for several months now, but his time is almost up. I believe we have at least been interviewing for that position, but this probably won't take a hard start again until we have someone in that position, so
Is this requirement in the subdivision regulations?
it is.
Okay, I just thought maybe the planning staff would be working on that.
I mean, we'll ultimately work on the code revision itself once they decide where they land on exactly what the requirements will be as we start moving through dealing with these smaller lots. But for the most part, they're the ones that are deciding the safety and all of that comes along with the roadways.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time? No? The applicant, if you'd come forward, state your name, address, and that you've been sworn in. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, Elise Batzel, Stearns Weaver Miller, 401 East Jackson, on behalf of the applicant. Robin actually covered everything that I was going to cover in my presentation, so I don't want to duplicate information that you just heard. But we are here to answer questions. The applicant's representative, Steve Luce, is also here to the extent there's any business questions that you have that may relate to your issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Covered it.
Okay. Is there a motion or further discussion?
There's nobody else.
Everybody else.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just, yeah, I apologize. Is there anybody else here to speak on this case?
I'll make a motion.
See? There we go. Thank you.
And I'll second.
Would you like to?
I make a motion that we approve the variance as presented.
Okay, thank you.
second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? We've got Mr. Miller on the line too, so want to make sure he's able to be heard.
No questions here.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? We'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimously passed. So, thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to case BOA 2021-02, Walden Woods Holding. Welcome. Introduce yourself. We're glad to see you and that you have been sworn in.
Okay, good afternoon, board. My name is Ross Einstetter, planner with the City of Plant City, and I have been sworn in. The item before you is BOA 2021-02 for the 2051 Walden Woods Drive sign height variance. So the location is on the west side of Walden Woods Drive between Park Road and East Alexander Street. The zoning is R2 multifamily with a future land use of residential 12. The current use is a assisted living facility, and because of that, the property can be considered both residential and non-residential. With the primarily residential, this sign regulation for the residential property applies in this case. So the applicant is requesting a variance from section 102-1742 A2A for increased sign height. So in the R2 code, the maximum sign height is 4 feet, and the applicant is requesting 6 feet. So that's a variance of 2 feet in height. Section 102-1742 A2A states that for sign location in the area between the minimum sign setback of 5 feet and the building setback line of 20 feet, the maximum sign height is 4. However, if the sign is located between or behind the building setback line of 20 feet, the maximum sign height is 15 feet. So if this development was considered a non-residential, the height could be 10 feet, but with a little bit less sign area. The sign is proposed more than 100 feet from the north and south property lines away from the adjacent properties. Therefore, 2 feet additional sign height would not be noticeable nor out of the character of this area. It is staff's opinion that the applicant did submit substantial evidence for the 6 review criteria in support of the variance for section 102-1742 A2A regarding sign height. And staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance request to allow the increase in sign height from 4 to 6 with a variance of 2 feet. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I believe the applicant is virtually if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have questions for staff? Great job.
Thank you.
First time in front of us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Anybody?
I just have one.
Mhm.
I just want to know, when are you going to complete it? It just looks so beautiful when I get back.
I do not know that.
Okay.
Okay,
We're shooting to be done the end of March.
okay.
End of March.
End of
Thank you.
Okay. Well, and with that, with the applicant, would you introduce yourself, give your address and that you've been sworn in?
Michael Kirkland, Rimrock Development, 1000 Riverside Avenue, Jacksonville, Florida.
And were you sworn in?
I don't believe so, actually.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. We'll take care of that right now.
Sure.
If you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have some things you wanted to present as well today?
No,
Okay,
just would like to get a little bit bigger sign so we can see it.
okay, great, thank you. Is there anybody else here that wanted to speak to this case? No? Seeing none? Discussion and or a motion from the board?
I move for approval as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Anders.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a second. Any other discussion? No? All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I think that was unanimous. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a good day.
You as well.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to case BOA 2021-03, Shannon and Yvette Linder, 813 North Wheeler Street. Ms. Baker, welcome back.
Thank you. Robin Baker, Senior Planner, Planning and Zoning, and I have been sworn in. So our final case today is 813 North Wheeler Street, and the applicant is requesting a variance to the side setback on their property. The address is 813 North Wheeler. Zoning is R1A Residential District with a future land use of Residential 4. The variance request is to section 102-227C3 for a reduction in the required side yard setbacks to 15 feet, which is a 5-foot variance. Now, 813 North Wheeler Street is within the historic district, and the applicant is requesting this variance because they're proposing to construct an addition to the home. The home located on the property does not meet the required side yard setback, but is considered legal non-conforming as it was built in 1925 prior to the Plant City Code of Ordinances being adopted. Now, there is a provision in the code that prevents them from extending that nonconformity anymore. So that's what prevents them from being able to build onto the house, even if they kept it in line with the house, because the house is already encroaching. So they would have to set it back if they were to meet the code. The proposed addition encroaches within the 20-foot side yard setback line, with proposed setbacks on the, that should say northern boundary, being 15 feet. According to the applicant, there is no other location to place this addition to due to the building and lot layout, and I believe they're already rearranging some of the stuff in the house so that this can take place. The proposed addition was reviewed and approved by the Historic Resource Board on November 17th, 2020. They're actually proposing 3 total additions onto the house. It's just the one on the north side. It's actually going on the west side of the house, but protruding onto the north side is the only one that needed the variance. This is a layout of what the house will look like with the addition. The addition is shown there in yellow. Originally, you'll see over here on the right-hand side, so it's that north piece there that we're looking at that encroaches into the setback. But that survey there doesn't depict this drawing on the left correctly. It's actually at 15 feet, not the 17 feet that's shown. It is staff's opinion that the applicant did submit substantial evidence for the 6 review criteria in support of a variance from section 102-227C3 regarding building side setbacks. And staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance request to section 102-227C3 for a side yard setback of 15 feet, which is a variance of 5 feet for the north side of the building. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? No? Okay, thank you. And are the lenders here? Y'all want to come and say anything? If you would introduce yourself, state your address, and that you've been sworn in.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Linder, 813 North Wheeler, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
And pretty much she's submitted, discussed everything that we're looking for. If you have any questions, be happy to address them.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Any questions for the applicant?
No, but could you move the screen back to where it showed the yellow and the yellow box and the red circle or whatever? Oh, whoa, there you go.
Not too far.
There,
Oh, we did it again. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. I was just wanting to look at it just a little bit longer to see, but that wasn't in our packet, at least it
No.
wasn't, when I printed it, it wasn't there, so we didn't get a chance to see that.
Yes, I do apologize for that. These graphics were not actually submitted as part of the variance application. I just pulled these from the HRB application just so you could see it.
Well, thank you, it helps.
Um,
All right, and then it's a little bit off because it's 15 foot, 17.7.
Correct.
All right,
Initially, when the applicant came in to talk to staff being me, I was interpreting the code incorrectly, and I told them that they could do it as long as it stayed in line with the house. But then I learned quickly afterwards that that's not the intent of the code, and so I re-advised them, and so then we went back to the 15-foot setback because that's what they needed originally for the space that they needed. So that's why there's a discrepancy there.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant at this time? No, is there anybody else that wanted to speak to this case? Nope, okay. Any other conversation or motion from the board?
I have a motion to approve the variances requested.
Thank you, Ms. Vogel. We have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Again, Mr. Miller, I want to make sure you're heard if you have anything to add in.
No further questions from me.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Thank you again. Unanimous. Thank you. Good luck with your construction. So the only other order of business noted today is the election of officers. We have, our board has a chair and a vice chair. And we need a motion for, we'll start with chair.
Motion for Yvonne Fry to stay.
Thank you. I think I heard a first and a motion and a second, and I will accept that. Thank you. Any other?
And a third.
Okay. Why don't we vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I abstain? No.
General election.
All good. Thank you very much for your trust on that. We need a motion for a vice chair.
Motion for Rob Anders.
Rob Anders.
Oh,
We have a motion for Rob Anders. Did I hear a second as well?
Second again.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I think that was, did you abstain on that one? No, you,
all right, as long as you never.
we do all right. Okay, so we are, we've taken care of that order of business as well. Thank y'all. Anything else that we needed to cover? I think we're going to get an update on something.
I just want to introduce Josh Black. Oh, where did he go? Josh Blackman, he is a new planner. He started yesterday. So,
Welcome.
Just wanted to introduce you.
They always like to get you in front of the good boards before you get anybody else.
I was gonna tell Ross will be your favorite too. I'm just letting you know. Yeah. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Look forward to hearing cases from you. So, okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you.